to this edition of the KPMG Social Media Tax Chat, where we'll be discussing tax exemptions for small companies with a focus on the issues arising. My name is Oluwadamilora Daramola. I'm a manager at KPMG's Tax People Services Division, and I'll be the moderator for this session. As we're all aware, Nigerians are very entrepreneurial in nature. And with the rise of unemployment year on year in the country, we've seen an increase in the number of startups cutting across different sectors of the economy. And the impact of these startups cannot be overemphasized. And we've seen that the federal government, in line with the ease of doing business initiatives, has introduced some exemptions and incentives to aid these companies' growth. So today we'll be discussing these small companies just to provide guidance on the applicable tax incentives and then the matters arising from the exemptions and the incentives. And to discuss this here today, I have two great people here. And on the panel, firstly, I have Babatunde Akinmoses. He's the CEO and co-founder of SkyMore. He's an award-winning peer-to-peer lending fintech platforms that connects lenders to borrowers. Prior to SkyMore, he amassed experience working in finance and strategy across various multinational firms. He has a first-class bachelor's degree from economics in Bowen University here in Nigeria. He's a chartered accountant, and he holds an MBA from Lagos Business School and IESE Business School in Spain. Good morning, Babatunde.
Yeah, good morning, Damilola. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. We also have Aminat Jagede here with us on the panel. Aminat is an associate director in the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the Tax and Regulatory People Services here in KPMG, Nigeria. Aminat has accumulated over 14 years of experience with working with clients, business advisories, delivering added value services with industry-leading practices. Aminat also holds a bachelor's degree in accounting. She's a chartered accountant and also has a master's degree in petroleum economics and management from IFP in France. Good morning, Aminat.
Good morning, Dami, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. Good morning, Tunde. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, so glad to have you both here, and working with Aminat, who will be providing perspectives from the tax angle, and then Tunde will also just be giving us perspective from the working with companies, just practical industry knowledge. So I'm just sure with both of them here, we would have a wonderful discussion. So I want to say welcome again to everyone. We expect that this will be an engaging session. And even as the session progresses, I want to encourage you to, drop questions in the chat box. If you have anything that you would like to know or something that triggers you based on what we'll be discussing today, we would like to have your comments and your questions. And even as we go through, we'll just take those questions and discuss with Aminat and Tunde. So I will just take some opening remarks from Tunde and Aminat just to kick off. So I think I'll just start with Tunde. So today, just some opening remarks on the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dami. Thank you, Aminat. Great to see you after so many years. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here and having me as well. So Tunde, so what we do is, fintech lending for small businesses particularly, and that makes this topic very, let's say, very impactful and important at this particular point in time, right? Just a few months after we've come in, there's a new administration, since May, and we've seen a lot of fiscal monetary policy reforms, and definitely a lot of business owners, big, particularly small business owners too, are asking, so what's in it for me? And got the fiscal and monetary policy drive. Tax is going to be on the back burner. And everybody's going to want to know, what are my compliance requirements? What are the tax benefits for me? Are they easy to comply with? Do I understand them? And even if you want to tax me, the question is, am I even making enough money to be taxed in the first place, right? Before we even go to tax exemptions. So I think this conversation is, particularly timely, given the state we are in. We're going to see a lot more reforms with subsidy, with taxes. Who else knows what sort of interesting policies the new administration will come up with. So I would say it's a timely conversation for the millions of SMEs we have here, and even us as an individual, because one way or the other, we're all connected to some of these business owners, their friends, their family, they are people we know, they are key public stakeholders as well. So I look forward to sharing my thoughts on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tunde, and we're definitely looking forward to hearing from your industry knowledge. And like you said, yes, we are all connected, and so we'll just be glad to hear from you. So Aminat, also just like to have your opening remarks.
Thank you, Damian. Thank you so much, Tunde, for that, your opening remark. I think, like you said, it's very important because small companies are becoming very instrumental to development of countries' economies. And Nigeria is no exception. I mean, interestingly, what you find when you look at the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics reports, you find that small companies, or rather SMEs, are currently contributing about 48% of Nigeria's GDP. And when you look at the extent of their contribution to unemployment also, we're looking at over 84%. So yes, like you said, this is a discussion that needs to be, that's timely and also needs to be given some attention to, because we have a whole lot of new companies coming up and starting at small companies. We have a whole lot of startups in different sectors of the economy. Now, looking at the different economic policies, who are the companies that are mostly impacted? The smaller companies are the ones that have lower shock absorbers for some of these policies. I mean, when we look at the subsidy that was recently removed, and also the, the foreign exchange issue, small companies are greatly affected. So essentially, the conversation today is really about what are the succor that they have in terms of tax exemptions, what are the succor they have in terms of other economic policies that will help to boost their development and also enable them to grow, as we all expect in the economy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aminat. And I think we've seen from the introduction from Aminat and Tunde that this is going to be a very insightful session. So I just encourage us to just keep listening, and as we progress, and like I've said, if you have any questions as we go on, you can always drop them in the chat box and we'll be happy to take them. And so just before we go into the conversation proper, we'd just like to have a short poll. That poll will just help us to have an understanding of what our participants know about small companies and the things that guide small companies. So what we have on screen, we have put in a barcode, we've also put a link in the chat box. I think that should be coming up soon. So you can either scan the barcode or just click on the link. That will take you to Slido, and that's the app we'll be using for the poll. Just very short questions, just to get the perspective of everyone here on the chat. So yes, I think the link has been dropped. So let's just join using the link, or if it's easier, you can scan the barcode using your cell phone, and let's just have an interesting conversation. Okay, so yeah, we have the barcode up. You can also go to slido.com and then just put in this number, whichever one works for you. But I just encourage everyone. I see that we have over 150 participants, so I'd like to have everyone just join and let's have an interesting conversation. So I think we have the first question up, and it says, do you think that the current turnover threshold for small companies, as defined by the Companies Income Tax Act as amended, which is 25 million, is sufficient considering the economic situation in Nigeria? Okay, so I see that you have responses coming in. No seems to be winning it right now. Okay, I think yes, it's gradually catching up. So yes, we have 70% of people saying they don't think that that threshold is sufficient. It's very, very interesting. Still welcome a lot more views so that we can get a holistic view of what our people are thinking. So it's actually very interesting for me. I mean, that's what do you think about this? I mean, but this is just the first one, and people are already showing that they don't agree with this.
Yeah, I mean, I was laughing when I saw the poll responses rising up, because for me, I was thinking 25% is even a lot of money. So I'm thinking to myself, like, it's like most of us are not even we're not in the line of the people we are referring to as small companies, because how many companies in Nigeria are making up to 25 million in an annum? But of course, when you look at the overall picture, when you take into consideration, the different amounts that usually get thrown around in the country, then you would think that 25 million is a lot of money. But when you bring it down to the real situation of how much companies are making on a day-to-day basis or on an annual basis, then it seems like, it's sufficient. But again, I think we need to listen to our participants, because most of them, I want to believe, are small companies. So perhaps they're already making above 25 million threshold.
Yeah, but I see that, yes, it's slowly catching up. We have, seems to be reducing again. We have about 48 participants, and now it's like middle way. Because I totally agree. Oh, we're at 50%. I totally mean that, 25 million, just mentioning it would seem like a lot, but that's over a 12-month period, and it's just interesting. Wow, and the years seems to have caught up. I mean that. So a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I think more people are leaning to the fact that the threshold that has been stated is sufficient. Very interesting how this started and how it has turned. Okay, I think maybe we should just move to the next poll. Well, I think we've landed on yes, it's a slim chance, but we seem to have more people seem to think that amount suffices. So we'll just move to the next question on the poll. So what we have here, do you think that the requirement for small companies to submit income tax returns to the FRS adds to the administrative and financial burdens of small companies, as they might not have the expertise to prepare the returns and engage tax consultants? So this is just starting off, and we're at 50-50. Okay, we're beginning to reduce. I think these questions are very important, and it just helps us to see the mind of the people that are in the session with us. I just wait for a bit more yes, because we don't have a lot of comments, but a lot of people seem to think yes, or let me say more people seem to think that the requirement is an administrative burden. Atunde, what would you think about this? I think you deal a lot with small companies. So what would you think about this? Is there an administrative and financial burden, or do you think it's just something that they should move along with?
Well, it is, I think it's an administrative and financial burden, but that doesn't, how do I say, that doesn't mean that it's not necessary to be done, right? I think it's now a question of how easy and simple it is. I mean, we've seen the gradual transition to things like tax pro-max, right? There's now online. So, but what about the people that are individual businesses? Are all the state governments taking their own tax compliance processes online too? Because sometimes we're dealing with all these big companies, we're in Lagos, but we're not seeing the small company in one state somewhere that might not even have access to internet or whatever. How do we make it easy for them offline? So I think it can be a burden in quotation marks, but it's actually because we need the data, we need the information, we need the revenue when they eventually become big. So it's a question of ease, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's very true. There are two sides to it. It might be for some people, like you mentioned, people in some areas that might not have access, but that data is also important. We need that data as a country, just to enable us know, just the amount of companies we have, things that is happening, how much growth, how much help is these incentives or exemptions that we're going to speak about today helping them. So I definitely get your perspective. So I think the no's seem to be increasing. So I think most people seem to be aligning with what Tunde has said, but we still have 57% of our participants who have responded to the poll saying that it's a financial burden. And then 43% saying no, it's not. So it's just interesting to see. Okay, so I think for time we'll just move to the next poll. Okay, so in your view, should small companies be exempted from paying state taxes and levies such as business premises, development levies, consumption tax, ECT? Apart from companies' income taxes, there are other taxes that companies definitely pay. So just to see what do our participants think. Should they be exempt from all taxes, or should they be just focused on the company's income tax on their profits? Okay, we have 62% saying no. So that means that these companies should still be paying. It is very interesting to see. So we're at, okay, let me just allow for a bit more participants to come in. But what this is saying, anyway, as we can see it, is that people do believe that small companies shouldn't be exempt from everything. They should still be paying some levies, some taxes, as they progress in their business. It's very, very interesting to see. I see that, the percentage is moving, but I think no still holds the fort. So it seems that people believe that there should be some taxes paid. Very, very interesting. Okay, so I'll just move to the next poll question, just to see what our participants think. So next question that we have here is, what level of impact do you think the tax exemption on small companies has on the Nigerian economy, particularly given the incessant fiscal budget deficits? I'm sure that we're all aware that the budget for 2023, there is a deficit on that budget. And so we're looking at the tax exemption that was introduced in, I think, 2020, to say, what do you think is the impact? And you'll be glad to just see, do you think it's significant? Do you think it's insignificant? Or are you neutral? Do you not think that there is much impact that is having? Okay, let's see how that goes. I think we're okay. A lot of people seem to think, or at least 50%, 60 now, seem to think that the impact is insignificant. And I mean, maybe you're thinking of it from the perspective of, if you have a turnover of 25 million, your profit is going to be small anyway, to consider the costs and all of that. And so it might be insignificant to consider an amount. But as they say, little drops of water do make a mighty ocean. So just ignoring the impact that small companies, Aminat mentioned, I think about 46%, I think Aminat has said, of that being small companies or SMEs, and consider the impact of, or the portion that relates to small companies, and then the impact that they will have. I don't know if I would say it is significant, but it's really interesting to say. But I think that insignificance seems to be taking the cap of it. So Tunde, what do you think about this? Do you really think that the impact is insignificant? Do you agree with the majority of our participants?
Well, I think if we're looking at past data and historical information, probably because what is even the compliance level for, at least based on my experience, I've seen that the practical compliance level is very low. But I mean, which is why I said historically, you can argue that it's insignificant. But if you are going forward and you had a situation where a lot of the small business were actually complying, given the millions of businesses, potentially it could be significant if that segment constitutes a large pool of entities that are actually complying, such that if you take the exemption out, then you see the impact on the tax revenue for the whole country, right? But as it is now, because there are so few of them complying, it's more likely that it's probably insignificant. At least that's what I think.
Okay.
Dami.
Yes, Aminat.
Aminat here. I think, again, maybe one of the reasons why the tax exemption is even being offered to small companies is to be able to quantify what is even the extent of this tax incentive, because at the end of the day, they are required to file tax returns, right? And you'll be able to see at a glance, based on the tax returns, how much tax you ought to have collected from these small companies. So yes, I do, it's going to be hard to determine whether it's significant or insignificant. Just like Tunde has said, at the moment, most of them may not be complying, but the jury is out to decide to ascertain whether or not it's a significant portion. Because when you look at who are even the small companies, I mean, what comes to my head are your typical Instagram business owners, you're buying and selling. And I mean, I know we have a couple of them in the IT sector, but you know, the essence is really for us to have some form of data so that we can even know what portion of our economy is being serviced by small companies.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. I mean, I think that's really one of it. That's reason for filing those returns, so we can see the extent and see, okay, what we are giving to these companies, is it enough? Do we need to do more for them? And you know, like I think Tunde had mentioned, data is very key. And I think this is one of the ways too that we'll just have an understanding of what we are doing for small companies and then the impact as it is now. Interestingly, on our polls, we seem to be at let's say an impasse. Okay, seems to be reducing again, but at that point, you know, same number of people thought it was insignificant and significant. So it's just really interesting. So we'll just take our last 4 questions so that we can move to the questions proper and then begin to have this discussions. So final questions, do you think that the current tax incentives for small companies operating in Nigeria are sufficient to stimulate their growth? I think it's really what we are discussing today. So it would be nice to see what our participants think. Do we think that the current incentives, I think there are a couple, and if we go into the session, we'll be able to have an understanding and even see if people are aware of these incentives. But looking at the poll currently, what it seems is that 68% of our participants seem to think that the incentives are not enough to stimulate growth. Very, very interesting thought. I'm tempted to just take opinions, but I think I will just maybe move to the questions proper because I know that we're kind of discussing this. So let me not put the cart before the horse. But it seems that a lot of people don't believe that those incentives are sufficient. Very, very interesting views I see from our participants. So I think this is the end of the poll. I want to say thank you to everyone that provided their responses. Just helped us to have an understanding of where our head is at with regards to small companies and the exemptions, incentives that are available to them. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. So I think that I will just maybe come to focus on questions, just to try and see or get from Aminat and Tunde some understanding of what small companies are and what they relate to. So Aminat, I'll just start you off with the questions. And my first question is, just to be clear, I know we've discussed it, but just to be clear, for Nigerian tax exemption purposes, which companies actually qualify as small companies? What kind of companies are we speaking to when we talk about small companies from a Nigerian perspective?
Okay, thank you very much, Dami. I think what is important to note here is that this definition and the discussion we are having today is restricted to tax purposes alone. Because if you look at the CAMA, there is a different definition for what qualifies as a small company. But for Nigerian tax purposes, a small company is a company that has a gross turnover of less than 25 million naira in a particular year. And in this instance, gross turnover relates to economic activities or economic benefits that are arising from just your operating activities. So we're looking at how much do you make from your sale of goods, how much do you make from providing services, so or how much do you make from putting your money into, money from your business into some form of savings account. So at the end of the day, we're not looking at one-off transactions for this purpose. It's really just for your economic activities, what benefit do you derive in terms of turnover? And for any company that makes between 0 to 25 million naira in a particular year, you qualify as a small company for this purpose. So that would be the guidance for this discussion that we're having this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I think it was very key to mention that. So for limited liability companies that have turnover between 0 and 25 million, so less than 25 million. That's the focus of this conversation that we're having today. So thank you, Aminat. Just before I move to Tunde, I just have one more question for you, Aminat, just to be clear. I think what we already know is that there's an exemption for company income tax for these small companies.
Yeah.
And I know you kind of touched on it when we were talking during the poll, but just to have an understanding of why do you think the FRS requires these small companies to still submit income tax returns? And since they've already said they're exempted, why not just let them be? Why do you think they need to submit? Any other reason apart from you mentioned? And what happens if these tax returns are not submitted by small companies? Just for them to have an understanding. So that's just the question. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dami. I think first things first that we need to highlight is that it's not the FIRS that requires companies to submit tax returns. It's a requirement in the Companies Income Tax Act. The FIRS, which is the Federal Inland Revenue Service, is just an administrator of that act, right? And the law requires all companies, even companies that are exempted from incorporation, to submit a tax return at the end of the year. What is important to mention here is that the way tax laws work is, unless there is a specific requirement for you not to comply with a relevant provision of the law, then all companies are required to comply. So even though small companies are exempted from paying tax returns, the tax law still requires them to submit their return. It's similar to what you have for companies operating in the free trade zone area, wherein even though you are exempted from taxes, you still need to demonstrate and give an idea of your business activities for the year. But at the end of the day, you would not be paying any tax, right? That's one. And in terms of income tax in this instance relates to companies' income tax and tertiary education tax. So for small companies, yes, you're required to make that computation. However, there will be no payments that should be made. Now, that being said, a small company cannot decide and say, oh, because I'm a small company and I am not liable to taxes, then perhaps I don't need to submit my return. Because in that regard, there's also a provision of the law that states that if such company does not submit its tax returns, then the penalties that apply for non-submission of tax returns would be applicable. And in this instance, it is 25,000 for the first month in which you fail to submit your return, and 5,000 for every subsequent month in which that failure continues. And for a small company, again, I say every time I'm thinking about small companies, I'm not thinking of the maximum threshold, which is 25 million. I'm thinking of your companies that make 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, and the likes. When you put together this late filing penalty, which is an additional burden on the company, then it can become a rather significant amount for them. So I would advise that small companies, yes, you're not required to pay taxes, but please, as much as possible, comply with the provisions of the law, which requires you to submit your returns as and when due. And for the deadline or the statutory requirements, companies are expected to submit this within 6 months after the end of their accounting year.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that's spot on to say, even though you're not making payments, just submit your returns. Let's have that understanding. Like we said, that data is very important for Nigeria to be able to determine how much small companies do we have, how much are we going to be gaining, or how much do we say that they are earning, how are they doing really, and it's just important that those returns are submitted. So thank you very much, Aminat. So Tunde, I just push a question to you. What do you think are the potential benefits for tax exemptions for small companies in Nigeria, both for the businesses themselves and then the broader economy? I know you deal with small companies a lot, so just pushing that question to you. What do you think are the potential benefits of tax exemption for this company?
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Dami. Yeah. So, I mean, there are a number of benefits, right? So I think for the companies themselves, you look at stuff like it's sort of a means of, should I say, reinvestment into the company itself. They make some tax officials like to make this joke that the government is a shareholder with 20 or 30% in your business, depending on the on the tax before, right? So if you're not paying that, I think part of the assumption is that money would go back into reinvesting in your business, right, which has a lot of positive impact. You should be able to employ more people, which then, adds to both your company and the broader economy, because that's job creation too. And we're just talking about overall economic growth because there are over, depending on who you ask, anyways, there are over 40 million SMEs in Nigeria, and you try to look at the impact that each one could have in terms of economic growth, in terms of job creation, and just overall economic development. Because if you look at most businesses, I think SMIDA will tell you that small businesses have between 1 to 199 employees, but that's not the reality, right? What we've seen is small businesses typically would have maybe 10 or less employees, especially when you look at the definition that Amina gave us of 25 million naira, right? We have few, but a lot of us don't look at the multiplier effect of just one person having a job. Typically, they have dependents, right? So you're helping one person, but there's a family of 2 or 3 that then multiplies into a good number of people. So we're talking about reinvestment into the business, which helps it grow, which feeds into the broader economic benefits of economic growth, employment, and even the overall development of the nation. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things that we reference in places that we like are actually built by businesses. So you want to encourage entrepreneurship, you want to encourage the private sector to thrive, because a lot of these businesses actually offer solutions that you and I use on a daily basis, right? So we're on Zoom today. Well, once a business that has grown and it's providing utility for us today, and that's how you also think about businesses. How could they be a good utility to the overall nation and themselves from making profits eventually? So I guess the overall idea is encourage these businesses. Give them tax exemptions, let them reinvest it into their businesses and grow, and then start complying such that that revenue that they start to make when they are billionaires can accrue back to the economy by way of tax revenue and economic development. Yeah, so that's what I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I totally agree, especially speaking to that ripple effect. You say, okay, you hired one person, but that person can be a breadwinner to, we say, 5 or 6 people. And just that employment just does so much and it's very instrumental. So yes, thank you very much, Tunde, for the comment. I know, just tying into something that you said, you said it's important to give tax incentives to these companies to help them grow, and you just build them up so that you're able to pay taxes. So I just push a question to Aminat that came to mind. So Aminat, looking at small companies, is it just companies income tax that they have an exemption for? Because we've discussed the companies income tax exemptions, but are there other exemptions that they should be aware of moving forward? Just the entrepreneur that has started their business and they want to know about.
Okay, thank you, Dami. In addition to income tax, which, like I mentioned earlier, covers companies' income tax and tertiary income tax, small companies are also exempted from value-added tax, right? So in terms of registration, in terms of issuing invoices that requires you to include VAT, in terms of charging VAT and also paying VAT, small companies are also exempted from that. So, I mean, it's really just like Tunde was saying, it's really just to show the type of investments that the Nigerian economy is making into these companies, because you and I know that 7.5% of your supply, that's a huge cost for most businesses, and most these businesses in this instance are being exempted from paying that and also from even charging. Of course, that doesn't stop their customers from paying the VAT, especially if those customers are companies operating, large companies and medium companies. But for the small companies themselves, that's 7% of your costs on the top line. So for me, I think that's also an additional benefit. And in addition to that is also the fact that if a small company invests in another manufacturing company that is also a small company, any dividend that you earn from that manufacturing company in the first year of in the first 5 years of its operation, you also get it tax-free. So it's not just companies income tax, you have some dividend free tax from manufacturing companies, and VAT. VAT is one of those taxes that it eats you almost immediately. So I think that's also a huge benefit to, small companies.
Yeah, I can totally agree to VAT. Just thinking of myself, maybe when I go out and then I buy something and then I see the VAT and how much it has increased it. So I can just imagine the relief for small companies and just having that exemption, not having to pay that on their cost. But just also mentioning that, just because I remember a client was working with a small company and they were like, oh, this small company has an exemption. So that means I shouldn't be paying the taxes. I know I had to clarify to say, the exemption, unfortunately, is just for a small company. Yeah, you are a large size company, you need to self-account, but just having that amount go off, I can imagine the relief that small companies will have. So thank you very much, Aminat. And just going at the back of that, Tunde, I just wanted to ask, how do you think about these exemptions? Do you think that there's enough level of awareness with small companies? You think they are aware of these exemptions? Aminat has talked about companies income tax, tertiary income tax, VAT, and even dividends. So I wanted to think, what do you think is the level of awareness with regards to this, and how the government doing, and how do you think, or what do you think they can do to increase that level of awareness? So Tunde.
All right, thanks, Dami. So that's a very important question, and I think these are like sound bites that we say, right? If you talk about challenges of tax compliance, first answer I always give to sound very intelligent is lack of awareness, but it's real. That's the reality. I think you always start from the point of, oh, there are these tax exemptions, there are these tax benefits, but how many people even know? Because if you go to the, Aminat said something very interesting, right? About you have a lot of Instagram, social media vendors, right? And the way that those transactions happen, you see maybe you find here like the one that has on, see it on Instagram, and they say it looks like it's 200K. You transfer money to the person's account, and that's it, right? There's no VAT, there's no nothing. There might not even be an invoice, right? So it's you start from the point of how many people even know. But interestingly, it has improved over time. I think the internet has really helped. So there's been a lot of like what we're doing now, right? This wasn't happening a few years ago. There were no Zoom, at least while I was in KPMG, there was no Zoom webinar at the time. Everything was physical. So that sort of needs to spread. Now we have over 200 people listening to this and, sort of getting more information, which sort of now buttresses the point that it's not just a government initiative, it's also private sector can also help. I mean, we are, private sector participants, but we're helping in that information dissemination, right? So the awareness has improved, but it's not enough. I think, some of the things that can really help, I think some of the more developed areas are actually much better. Like you take Lagos, Abuja, maybe Port Harcourt, there's a lot of information everywhere, a lot of, there are influencers, there are sessions like this, but you have to then look at other traditional media. How much of this is on radio? How much of this is on television? How much of it is offline? How much of it is in local languages, right? People have accused the National Orientation Agency of perhaps needing to do better in terms of taking a lot of this information, civic information, and policy information to convert to local languages and take it to all these places, right? Because they need that information. So I would say, in summary, the awareness isn't what it's supposed to be, because that's the first step of the problem. A lot of people still need to know, but at the same time, it has improved significantly. And now I think that improvement just needs to get into areas that might not be as digitally savvy as those of us in the more developed states in Nigeria. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tunde, because I know sometimes we're just maybe biased is the word, to look at things from perspective of Lagos and Abuja and say, okay, this information is going around, but there are 36 states in the country, and sometimes it would just seem like when we focused on these big states, we don't even imagine what is happening. So maybe if you ask me and I say, oh, Lagos, maybe a lot of people would know about it, but you're right. There needs to be ways of bringing this information down to those businesses in those states that may not be aware, don't even know what a small company is, what they need to do. So yeah, I think I agree. I also just wanted to ask you about what are your thoughts on how it's doing. I know you will have some relationships with, like you mentioned, Instagram vendors and all of that, and in different areas. What do you think is the level of awareness that has gone around with regards to these incentives and exemptions?
Okay, I would like to make a distinction again between the different states of the country. So if you're looking at the level of awareness in Lagos, I would say it's medium, right? Because I do interact with a couple of small business owners, and they are very much aware of their tax obligations and also the exemptions that they enjoy. But just like yourself and Tunde have rightly mentioned, when you now take it outside Lagos and you go to the more rural states of the country, the question is how many people are even setting up companies, because there's also a distinction that we need to make. And that is the fact that the small companies that we're referring to are companies that are duly incorporated in line with the provisions of CAIMA, because a lot of people actually do businesses using business names. So this exemption that we're talking about does not apply to them because they are trading as either partners or sole business owners, right? So the discussion we're having today are for companies that are duly registered under CAIMA and have, complied with the relevant provisions in that regard. But I agree with you that when you take the whole country into consideration, chances are the awareness level is quite low, because like Tunde mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, you are not even sure that a lot of these companies are even filing, talk less of, being aware of the relevant obligations for tax purposes. But that being said, I would also, commend the Federal Inland Revenue Service, in terms of the sensitization sections that they've been holding. I'm aware that in some instances, sessions are held with different trade union associations, just as a way to disseminate this information to other people. And if we look at how long this exemption has been, it was introduced in 2019. We're still in the very, early days. So, the essence is let's continue to talk about it and let's continue to let people become aware. Another thing I tried to do when I was preparing for this session was actually to reach out to some of our tax controllers to say, I would even like to know for your office, your tax office, what is the level of compliance for small companies? And, I got a response in the affirmative that a lot of them are actually coming forward. But again, we're talking about 36 or 40 million small companies all over the country. And I want to believe that using Lagos as a case study is not sufficient for that purpose. So I will still give the awareness level as low. And I will say, let's keep talking about it so that more companies can be aware of this exemption and take advantage of it, especially for value-added taxes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it was important that you made that distinction to say, this small company we're looking at is one that has been incorporated. But I know a lot of people just set up business names and they're doing business, and maybe they start to think that this exemption covers them. Just to state that if you are a small company under CAIMA, then it's expected that you'll be paying your taxes, you'll be paying companies income tax. But if you set up a business name or your partnership, then you're then paying personal income tax, and that's the reason why this exemption doesn't apply to you. And okay, thank you. I know that perspective on the tax controllers was also interesting, and them saying that people are compliant. But again, like you said, we're looking at Lagos, and as Tunde says, we really need to go out. I know that one of the things that the FRS does on Thursdays, anyway in Lagos anyway, is to go out to say they are just trying to provide some kind of awareness to say this is your obligation, this is what you should do. I'm not sure if it's being done in other states, but if it's not, I think it'd be something that would be very helpful, just to help companies understand what their obligations are and how they need to, because I would think that the new government, as we've seen year on year, the spotlight on taxes has begun to increase. And so companies need to start understanding what are my tax obligations and what do I need to do to ensure that I'm meeting up with them, just to be sure that you don't start accruing penalties and interest, because that really doesn't impact small companies. But these days penalties are pretty steep So companies even need to ensure that they are doing enough to ensure that they are meeting up with their compliance obligations. And so I want to say thank you, Aminat and Tunde, so far for the perspectives that you have brought. I also want to speak to our participants to say, please, we're encouraging you to drop your questions if you have questions, so that we can discuss and provide perspective on the issues that we have. I know, speaking to questions, I see a question here, and kind of ties into something that I had in mind. And someone here is saying, if a small business is defined by its turnover for tax purposes, what happens to a company that meets the threshold in 1 year, does not meet in another year? There are also conversations to say what happens if a company is small company this year, next year is a medium company, the other year is a small company. So I just wanted to get your perspective on that, to say how exactly are we dealing? Once you cross the small company threshold, you can't then go back to being a small company, or is it something that you can go through? Just to get your perspective of that.
All right, Dami, thank you for that. Interestingly, this is something that is a thorn in the flesh of most consultants, because there are different school of thoughts on how this will be handled. Some of the school of thoughts that when you cross the turnover threshold in a particular year, then you have become a medium company. But when you look at the strict provision of the law is clear. It does not put any caveat. It does not say, oh, once you have crossed it, then you can never go back. And the other interesting aspect is when you look at the tax Promax also, and you look at the way the system has been configured, what you find is that for companies with turnover of less than 25%, the tax Promax itself automatically does not calculate any tax for you. So that begs the question and also puts the issue to rest that, yes, if you can cross the threshold in a particular year, then you will pay the next band of tax rate, which is basically 20% of your assessable profits. And if peradventure you find yourself with a turnover of less than 25 million the next year, then your CIT is going to be zero, because the system is configured in a way that automatically exempts companies with less than 25 million from taxes. And we've seen that happening a lot with loads of dormant companies that in the past were pulling different figures, and all of a sudden they became dormant because of ongoing economic realities, and they qualify as small companies for tax purposes. So my response to that participant is, yes, in the year you cross the threshold, you would qualify as a medium company. However, when you revert back to less than 25%, the system, that's the CPM, will treat you as a small company. Now, it's a bit tricky when it comes to VAT now. It's a tricky one, but when you also look at the provisions of the VAT Act, what it has implemented, or what it has indicated in ascertaining who will qualify as a small company, is your expectation as to what is the quantum of activities that you will be generating in that particular year. What are you expecting to make from your business? So any year that you expect to make 25 million naira, then you would need to start charging VAT as from the beginning of the year, not wait until that particular month, because the word used in the law is expect to make, which is different from the CIT that refers to your gross turnover in a given period, in a given 1 year period.
Okay, thank you, Amina, because I know that, like you said, there have been various school of thoughts. Some people think once you cross the threshold, there's no going back. You need to ensure that you keep moving forward. And so it's just great to see that even the tax Promax has been configured in a way that allows you to move as well as your business is doing anyway. If you qualify as a small, pay taxes as small, as medium, pay taxes as medium. If you're a small company, then just submit your returns, just to be clear. And so thank you, Aminat. And I just saw a comment here that was made by participants, and just wanted to clarify, based on our conversation, to say, like what you said, the VAT Act, because VAT is not limited to whether you're a limited liability company or a business name. Everyone that makes statistical supplies of goods and services are liable to pay VAT. And so yes, the exemption that we have for VAT is not limited to just companies that are registered under CAMA. If you're a business name, if you are just any kind of company, what the VAT speaks to is, like Amina said, expected to make less than 25 million So that's just the distinction that we're making. So when we're speaking to companies, income tax and tertiary education, we're talking about companies registered under CAMA. But if we're looking at VAT, then it just specifies, because it knows that there are different kind of businesses. And so that is what it speaks to. So thank you very much, Aminat. So I'll just quickly.
Dami, I just want to add that statement you made to, also clarify that when you're looking at VAT, then you're looking at a taxable person as against a company. And, a taxable person includes an individual, a company, partnership, and the like. So yes, that distinction needs to be made that, for business names, you would also be exempt from VAT, because in this instance, you will qualify as a taxable person for VAT purposes.
Okay, yes. So just to quickly run to Tunde, I just wanted to ask, in your own perspective, do you think that the current tax exemptions that we've talked about are the most effective way to support small businesses? Your interaction with these companies and the conversations that you've had, what do you think? Do you think it's the most effective way, or what do you think that the government can do, which is other than these tax exemptions, to help small companies?
All right, thanks, Dami. I think the answer to that question is really no, in terms of them being very helpful to them. Again, many people don't even know. I think we've established that in the previous answer. And so it's not really seen as a very strong benefit for a lot of them. I think the answer to that question in terms of support, again, there are boilerplate answers that people complain about every day, which is infrastructure, access to finance, because those are really some of the more pressing things on the minds of a business that is just trying to grow, right? You're trying to pay your employees, you're trying to get products. And I think, now, because of the subsidy removal and, FX reforms, and we've seen very, very steep inflationary impacts. So people are really struggling to keep up with rising costs of doing everything. You made a plan that in the next 2 weeks, you're going to buy these goods and you're going to sell them at this price. And then you go to the market to buy them next week and they've already increased, right? So really getting some economic stability by way of inflation. Now, those are big ticket, items. Those are things that government can do. I know we talk about access to finance a lot. You can't overflog that. When I started in this industry and you see a lot of small business intervention loans, and you stroll there to go and see what they're offering, you see the requirements, and there's no way an actual small business can meet a lot of those requirements. A lot of them are still asking for a lot of documentation. Many of them still asking for collateral. You should have been in business with cash flow in your bank statements. And you're thinking, well, I'm a new business, right? I don't have history, but a lot of the traditional financial institutions don't want to hear that either. So yeah, it's really about empowering the small businesses to even start making money before thinking of the tax exemption, because there's no tax exemption if there's nothing to tax. So I guess helping them to structure support, access to finance, and even education too, because like we've all said, they even need to know that this exists. So that when they are doing the plans and the planning for the growth of the business, they can factor it as a potential benefit into the investment of the business.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I even have a comment, from one of our participants that kind of aligns with what you said, to say, there needs to be more that should be done for these small companies, because, when you say that you want to meet the threshold, coupled with inflation and impact of Forex, a company can maybe even exceed that threshold within a period of time. And then really that exemption then seems to be lost, just starting off the business. And, because Nigeria is, for lack of a better word, let me say, fertile ground. And once you have a very good business idea, it picks up easily. And also even looking at that threshold that has been stated, to say, is that even sufficient? And like you've spoken about finance, I think finance is very key. And so these companies getting the appropriate level of awareness, or options for loans that can help them build these companies. And once they become medium, once they become large, and they begin to pay taxes. And like you mentioned earlier, shareholders begin to get their dividends or by the government. You would then see that the advantages of the work that was put in at their grassroots stage should be very key. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you have any comments on this quickly. I know we're almost at the top of the hour, but let me just see if you have any comments on this.
Okay, Dami. So I think that at the end of the day, just like Tunde has said, small companies really are more interested in raising revenue, one, so that they can easily grow, and that it is only when you make profit that there's something to pay anyway. And when you take into consideration the high inflation rate in the country these days, the effect of Forex and the likes, you find that more people, more companies are actually making losses in terms of, and there's really no profit to pay taxes on. But, in terms of the high exchange rate and its impact, I would still say that, yes, chances are, if you look at your cost or revenue or anything, chances are you may cross the threshold before you know it. And once you have crossed the threshold, it is what it is. So once you are above 25 million and you are no longer a small company and you have become a medium company, if you make profit, then you will charge it to tax at the rate of 20%. And if you make a loss, the law allows you to carry it forward until when you make a profit for which you can offset it again. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I understand the dynamics that the current economic realities has thrown more companies into, but be it that as it may, it is still, you still need to follow the provisions of the law with regards to whether you're a small company or a medium company. The rate at which you become one does not really matter in the scheme of things.
Yeah, thank you, Aminat. And I have a quick question, just off the back of what you just said, because you were talking about categories and all of that. So I'm just wondering, how can a company know if they fall within the category of being a small company before the end of the financial year? Speaking to VAT, how can they have an understanding of what category they fall in? Because I remember you made reference to category in just speaking.
Yeah. So for that, what has worked is that the expectation is most companies will have a track of the income they make on a monthly basis, right? For VAT, I think let's address the issue of VAT first. VAT law indicates that if you expect to make taxable supplies of 25 million or more, it could be cumulatively or singularly. That is, perhaps at the beginning of the year, you're thinking, oh, chances are I am going to win a contract of 25 million towards the end of the year. Then as of that time, you need to start accounting for VAT. Then that exemption does not apply to you again. But for companies that are transacting on a month-to-month basis, then I would expect that such companies are keeping track of their records. I want to believe that today's service provision also provides some form of, will I say, apps or even technological tools that companies can adopt to track their information. And if they're not using that, they can use their bank statements, how much, inflow came from your business activities on a month-on-month basis, so that you're able to track at what point do you hit that 25 million threshold. So it's really, I know it's still a gray area now, because ordinarily there's supposed to be some form of clarification from the FIRS, but that is yet to be issued. But for now, what I know most companies are doing is to track their information and to see if they would eat it. Ordinarily, most companies are, putting their Excel worksheet together, because you also need to know what you're making from your business anyway. So it's really to continue to track and see if you would eat that threshold before the end of the year. If you eat it for VAT purposes, yes, you need to start accounting for VAT. But if you don't, I mean, at the end of the year, your income is less than 25 million, and you would be certain that you did not cross the threshold for income tax purposes or even for VAT purposes.
Yeah, thank you, Amina. So I think that is very key. You need to track, even not for tax purposes. It's important that you track, maybe have some kind of management accounts you do monthly, or even at the end of the year, that helps you understand where you are as a company, if you've crossed the threshold, if you're now a medium company or a small company. And kind of ties into a question that I have here, someone asking about, do you need to do a statutory audit to determine if you're a small company or if you want to file returns. And if you are tracking that, like Aminat has said, if you are doing that tracking, it helps you to know. I think one of the provisions of the CAMA says that small companies don't have to prepare a statutory audit, and so you are not. It's not compulsory that you do that, but what is important is that you track. When as a business, ensure that you're tracking it, so you know when you cross that threshold, and you are not saying, "Oh, I'm not aware," or "I think I was doing badly." It's important for all companies to have that understanding, and so that will help them to know the category that they are with respect to type of business. I can see that the time is 11, and we've been talking for about an hour. And I think that the participants will agree that has been quite an informative and insightful session. So I think maybe what we can do is just take like a 2-minute break, just to allow our panelists, maybe drink water or take a stretch, and then we'll just be right back. So thank you, everyone. Let's just take a short break.
Learn on the go and stay informed. Our goal is to keep the average user informed and up to date with relevant tax information. For the entrepreneur and investor, getting acquainted with tax laws and regulations could be quite daunting. Well, not anymore. Introducing the KPMG Tax mobile app, where you can access all tax-related news, laws, and insights in one place. Also, calculating personal income taxes has never been quicker. To get the app, simply search for KPMG Nigeria Tax on Google Play Store or iOS Store and install. Once installed, quickly do a one-time sign-up on the application to access a constantly updated library of news, laws, and articles alongside easy-to-use tools. The KPMG Tax mobile app has a minimalist design, making it effortless to use and navigate. What's more, if you can't find what you need, asking a professional is as fast as it gets. Let's walk you through the application. The full menu is accessible from the left and helps you jump to any part of the application in seconds. Access fresh tax news by clicking on the news icon. The seamless scroll makes it simple to view all news at a glance. You have news you've already seen and want to go back to? Just search. Expand or share each news item to your friends with the dedicated buttons. Adjust your news preference easily from the settings icon and tailor your content. We have embedded tax legislation and popular cases in our tax laws section. Are you eager to know more about taxation in Nigeria? KPMG Tax app has more than enough for you. Stay on the cutting edge of industry updates with insights features. The new app brings together alerts, newsletters, articles and publications from industry-leading KPMG professionals. You don't have to worry about missing important regulatory dates and other notable events. The notable date feature brings them all into one place in a calendar or list, however you want to view them. For the average employee, entrepreneur or business person, KPMG Tax app has another important feature, the PIT calculator. Plug and play, simple as it gets. Input the required numbers and calculate your taxes. Also, the app has jokes and valuable tips. Check in to learn something new and fun. Still feel there's more to know? We've got your back. Ask an expert and get quick, insightful responses from KPMG professionals when in doubt. Learn more from various authorities through recommended links in the external links tab. Read all about us to find out more about KPMG's service offerings, our responsible tax principles, and disclaimer. It's now a breeze to connect with us online. Just click on the link icon on the homepage to get to us on social media. KPMG Tax app, connecting with you on the go.
Okay, thank you everyone, and welcome back. So just before we go back to the conversation, we will just be taking another session of polls, just to have an understanding of where our participants' minds are at based on the conversations that we've had so far. I think when we took the first poll, we had about 100 participants, and now we're about 250. So I expect that with this new session of polls, we should have more responses from the participants, just to have an idea of where they are with respect to our conversation. So again, just for people that joined in during the session, you can scan the barcode, or you can join the poll using the link that is in the chat box. So whichever one is easier, you can scan with your phone, or you click on the link and it will take you to the Slido app, which we'll be using for the poll session. So just waiting for people to join in so that we can start. We just give a few seconds for people to do that. So either you scan the barcode or you join using the link. Okay, I hope that we're joining. Important to have, or to be good to have a lot of people giving their position on the issues, and so that it will just be easier for us to know what people think about it. So I think we can start off on the session now. So like I said, we have the poll, and then the first question that we have here is really just to get people talking. So now it's not really about options. It's just on the back of the question that I asked Tunde, and then Aminat had also spoken to say maybe the tax incentives that we currently have are not really enough for small companies. So what additional incentives do we think should be made available to small companies in Nigeria? If you work with small companies or you interact with small companies, what incentives do we think that should have? So I think what we have here is a question. So I'd just like to really hear about the incentive, and I'll welcome a lot of comments, just help us to have an understanding of what our audience thinks with regards to additional incentives. And then now it's not particularly limited, or should not be limited to tax incentives, just looking at the small businesses. I think each and every one of us is in one way or another affiliated with a small business. So based on conversations that you've had with those businesses, what do you think are the additional incentives that should be made available that can help them grow, help them really just increase, move on from a small company to maybe a medium size or a large company? Okay, I see our participants are typing. So Tunde, I don't know if you have any off the top of your head that you think is an incentive that should be introduced for this small company.
Oh, is that that's incentives generally outside taxes?
Yes, outside taxes. Anything that you think should introduce?
Oh, okay. I think that we can make general, again, the things that are easier. It can be maybe more targeted at specific sectors. So I guess it depends on what you are doing. So for example, what are the compliance requirements for someone in manufacturing? If they're in the food business, they need to get a NAFDAC number, right? But everybody has to go through the exact same process. Can we make that? Can we make any concession from when a Nestle needs a NAFDAC registration number to when somebody that's starting business in their house? That's just an example, right? Can we also, like what I mentioned, finance before? Right now, it's still very difficult for small businesses to get access to financial services. I mean, thankfully, there are a lot of fintechs trying to address this, right? But the gap is still very, very, very wide in terms of how many people can actually just get access to finance. So just making it easier, interest rates, all the requirements that is needed. Okay, I'm not supposed to call specific businesses, but some certain kind of institutions make it more difficult, and they don't really look at the differences between small businesses and big businesses. And we've also been talking about like export promotion. Export promotion, it could be a lot easier for maybe small businesses to also get engaged in exports too. Because if you try to go through, again, the financial institutions, there are certain, a lot of the requirements are blanket. If you need to access FX or whatever it is, it's the same requirement for everybody. And some of those things are good, right? For example, because of some of those requirements, some people are getting their tax clearance now because they need to access certain things at the bank, which is good. Even if it's nil returns, right? You can still get your tax clearance. And that's what Aminat was talking about, that you should still comply even if you're not paying anything. So I think that should be encouraged as well. So I think if we look at each sector-specific activity, we can look at what the licenses required. You look at things like FX, things like import and exportation. Can we just make the process easier, at least get them into the regulatory net, quote unquote, and then let them grow. And then, when they become big, please start taxing away. But I think the first is to make things, business a lot easier for them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tunde. I think a couple of people here align with what you said. I know I saw a comment with respect to loans. I also saw someone speak to export processing, receiving a special rebate. So let me just run through the comments that we have here. Someone thinks that additional tax holidays should be granted to small companies. We also have loans, like you mentioned, minimum tax allowed. I'm not sure this minimum tax coming, because one of the incentives that small companies have is they're not liable to minimum tax. So maybe you can just clarify on what you mean by minimum tax allowed. I also saw a comment, someone was saying once they've extended the period, once they've crossed over, maybe they're a medium company, they should only pay on the excess of 25 million. That's a very interesting position. The TIT should, so for instance, if a company earns 30 million, they should only pay tax at 20% on 5 million. Very, very interesting. Free regular trainings on business management. Okay. So someone's talking about when we have up to 50 employees and up to 100 million, you should not pay CIT, but pay VAT. So that means you're trying to increase the rates or the definition of a small business to about 100 million. That's very, very interesting. I think another person here is still talking about the extended tax holidays. So just in line with what Tunde was saying, ease of products for manufacturing companies. I think people kind of align with what we've spoken about. I still see someone mentioning loans, and also comments here about local levies, because I also saw a comment someone made to say, we might have reduced or taken off company income taxes, but there are still taxes that are being paid at local government level. So, I think that's really what everybody just seems to be aligning. We have comments on loans, on grants, on helping the businesses. And so I think we can just move on to the next poll. So thank you everyone for your comments. And I think it kind of aligns with what we're talking about, and just really note the things that government needs to focus on. And I think, like Aminat had said, or I think I'm not sure if it's Aminat or Tunde, there are some, I think it was Tunde, there are some available loans for small companies, but the process. So one thing we should also be looking at is the ease, in line with the ease of doing business initiative, the ease of getting these loans from the companies. And so we're also looking at, apart from, I think we kind of merged up this question with the last one to say what other policies should government initiate to provide an enabling environment for small companies. I think that kind of ties into the comments with regards to loans that people mentioned, with regards to trainings. I know someone mentioned, okay, I see another comment here. I think a lot of people are on the loans, talking about installment payment, talking about single-digit interest loans. So I think that's where a lot of our participants have their head at, to say, even more than taxation, we need to look at loans and the ease of these companies getting the loans, and just ease of doing business. And really applaud the federal government and how they have begun to pay attention to how the ease of doing business impacts small companies. But I think these are additional policies that these companies should consider with respect to policies that the federal government can introduce. And so, Aminat, I don't know if you have any comments with regards to these policies that people have been speaking to.
Yeah, thank you, Dami. I just wanted to make a comment with regards to, the additional incentives that were noted on the last poll question. I noted that somebody mentioned that extended tax holiday for small companies. I thought it was important to clarify that in as much as a company qualifies as a small company, then you are exempt from taxes. In that regard, there's no additional tax holiday that is required, because once you have yet to meet the 25 million threshold, then CIT is not required for that purpose. And the same thing with minimum tax. I just thought to indicate that. And with regards to installment payments for taxes, I think that's also something that is currently applicable in our current tax laws, because the tax laws envisage a situation where companies pay their CIT mostly CIT instrumentally, provided that you make your last payment, before the due date of tax payment. That's something that is already obtainable. That's two. And then the last one I wanted to make is you also have instances where perhaps a company, you have been audited, and this does not apply to small companies. Now I'm just talking generally. If you've been audited and you make a case to the FIRS or even the State Internal Revenue Service to pay your additional liability instrumentally, once the company is able to provide good costs, I think, in some instances, the tax authorities actually approve for such companies to, settle their additional liabilities instrumentally. So the essence of this is just to clarify that this is something that's already obtainable in the existing tax laws.
Okay, yes, thank you, Aminat, and thank you for that clarification. I also see a comment here talking about electricity, and I know it's not, if we dive into that, we'll probably not leave here today, but I think it's part of the things that the federal government and the new government is looking to, with regards to palliatives that are coming at the back of the removal of the subsidy. So we're hopeful that even as the new government moves on in these processes, we'll begin to see some of these coming with respect to loans, with respect to electricity, even talking about mass transit. Some of these conversations is what we expect that would come along. So we'll just move to the next poll, so that we can have an understanding of that also. So the next question on the poll. Okay, so another question here. Do we think that the exemption of small companies from taxation provides a long or short benefit to the Nigerian economy? Oh, apologies, Tunde. I just saw your hand is up. Do you want to make a comment with regards to what we were speaking to?
Yeah, I mean, it was based on a comment I saw on the previous screen, right? That somebody was talking about the threshold for small businesses. I think was recommending 100 million or something. And it's important I just wanted to quickly make that point that part of what can be done eventually, and I think Aminat sort of set the ball rolling in respect to that. There needs to be some sort of alignment and harmonization of what small business actually means, because Medan has a definition. There's a definition in CAMA, and there is also a definition somewhere else. I know I've seen like 3 different definitions. Yeah, so tax, Medan, and CAMA have different definitions for what a small business is. And if you go to a bank, they'll tell you what their own requirements for a small business is, and you're trying to make a case for what the reference should be, right? So I think it's important to sort of make that harmonization. I think usually there are like 3 criteria. It's either going to be turnover, net asset or asset base or net asset, depending on who you're asking, and then I think number of employees. Those are typically the things that are looked at, right? I think there needs to be some sort of what's our single source of truth, so that we know when we're referring to small businesses, medium businesses in Nigeria, this is what we are talking about. It will be easier to even get data. It will be easier to make decisions based on them, because we can classify them appropriately and in one voice. So I just thought I should add that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's very key, really. Like you mentioned, 3 different bodies giving 3 different definitions, and then so in one place, I'm a small company, and another instance, I don't qualify as a small company. Is I think one of the canons that we've always had in taxation is things being clear. And if you under one under this body or this, under KAMA or this, under that you're is, I agree that it can be quite for lack of a better word, say disruptive to clients' processes in dealing with different bodies. So I agree that that's something that really needs to be looked into. So just have a universal definition in Nigeria as to what would be a small company or what would be a medium company or a large company. So it's clear to everyone going forward. So thank you very much, Tunde, for that comment. And looking at the current poll that we have, I think a lot of people agree that it does provide a long-term benefit. And I think I agree with this. If we consider how it would impact those companies, once the awareness is out there and you're setting up a company, you are aware of everything that you need to do. I think at the long run, it does help those companies to be able to build. Like a comment that Tunde had made earlier to say that when you are a small company and you're able to take back those taxes into your business, it would be some kind of investment, and it would ensure that you're able to build on the business and grow in long term. So I think I would align with this. So I don't know if Aminat, if you have any comments, or Tunde, just before I run off. I think we're almost at the last poll question.
Yeah, I think, it's been said already that most countries usually use tax incentives as a way to stimulate a particular industry. And, as we mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, or the tax chart, which is basically that Nigeria is one of the countries that has seen the impact and the contribution of small companies to the economy. And of course, it is only important that these companies are, encouraged with the introduction of the tax exemptions.
Okay, thank you, Aminat. I think that is something that is true. So just to run through the last question we have on the poll, just given the current state of Nigeria's economy, do you think there should be a limit to the restriction to say, okay, if you've been a small company for 5 years, you at the 6th year, you no longer qualify, you need to start paying taxes? Or do we think that once you're a small company and you're able to prove that you're a small company, we should stick to that? I think we have 5 responses so far, and a lot of people, 67% think no. But just before we quickly run through, I want to see if we can get a bit more participants to comment on this. Do we think there should be a limit? I know we're already speaking about the 25 million threshold being low, but do we think that once a company has been on that percentage for maybe 10 years, then it's fine, it's time to start paying taxes, or we should just leave it at the restriction that we currently have? Okay, I think 75% seem to think that there shouldn't be a restriction, so we should leave things as they are. And I kind of agree. The company is struggling to surpass that threshold. I don't think that what should be done is then introducing taxes. I think we should just try to work on or help these small businesses as much as we can. And so I want to say thank you to everyone that has participated in the polls. I think it was the final question. So, just to continue the conversation, I kind of have a question for Tunde. I'm just thinking about, we've spoken now about the incentives that currently have. We're also speaking about the incentives that we think the government should bring in. So I'm just thinking about the balance. How do you think we can strike a balance between all of these incentives that we want them to introduce and ensuring that there's equitable tax collection across the different sectors or across Nigeria? So just a balance between introducing tax incentives and on the other side, because we still need the revenue to build up the nation and all of that, ensuring that there's equitable taxes. So what do you think on that balance?
Yeah, I think it's a very that's a very important consideration, right? Because you have to balance it, right? We don't want to give all the revenue away in the name of tax incentive. So I think there are a few things that can be done, or which some of them are already even being done, and maybe can build upon. As Amina just said, you also want to make sure that it's targeted, right? If you have any industry you want to encourage, maybe they can get more tax incentives. And maybe the other guys can get less. You can sort of try to balance that out. So you're making more money from a particular sector than that sector, depending on your policy and what you want to encourage. And as like the previous poll question alluded to, some of those things can also have term limits, right? It doesn't have to be forever. It's just like some of the requirements that say, well, after a certain period of time, the incentive will elapse, sort of like a holiday. Even the tax holidays themselves, they have limits. Right? So applying the limits to some of these incentives too would also help, right? And I think also making them prerequisites for doing certain things. If you want to go to some places now, we don't even want you to pay, right? Just show us that you filed your return. Just show us that you have a TIN or a PII ID, as the case may be. So you are bringing them into the system, and again, you're getting information and you're getting data, and you're sort of preparing them to comply. Because one of the disadvantages of giving too many tax and compliance incentives early on is people don't build that habit of being compliant, right? So assuming you're not filing, you're not paying for almost 4 years, you're just lounging, and then one day you just start making 1 billion and people just come to your gates. How far? Pay all, start paying, and you're not having to build that habit. So even if you're not paying, building that habit, complying and just getting used to it, even if you're saying, oh, I made this money, I'm still filing mail, it's fine, right? And then I think the overall objective of the government at every point in time is also important, right? Which is, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to get data? Are you trying to manage FX? Are you trying to, do you want to get the number of people living in a certain area? Whatever it is, you want to also tie compliance requirements to all those things, such that you are bringing as much people into the tax net, even if you're not taxing them immediately, allow them grow, and then you can start to tax later. So I think in terms of balancing it with our revenue objectives, it's sort of setting term limits, applying it to specific industries, making them prerequisites for certain activities, like maybe opening a bank account, getting an embassy visa, whatever it is, right? So that people can comply, and in that sense, we're not neglecting the objective of meeting our tax revenue and getting data eventually in the name of offering so many incentives and quote unquote. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Tunde. And I totally agree with that. It's important that try to put in that understanding or that awareness of what they need to do or what they will be doing subsequently, such that it's somewhere embedded in their processes, and even as they begin to build up, they are aware of things. So thank you very much, Tunde. I just have a question. I know we've spoken a lot about CIT and TET and VAT, and so I just want to come in a bit on withholding tax. So we are aware that for small companies, they are not expected to pay taxes, but just to understand what is their with regards to withholding tax, what is the obligation for withholding tax? Do companies deduct withholding tax on their income? If that withholding tax is deducted, how do we get it back? Just a good understanding with regards to withholding tax for small companies. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dami. To respond to that question, I would like to start from a clarification, which is the fact that withholding tax in itself is an advance payment of income tax, right? Which means that for you to even be subjected to withholding tax, then you must be liable to companies' income tax. However, what you find is that in the clarification that was provided by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, and I think even in the discussions that we've been having since morning, it is clear that one of the challenges of the tax exemption that has been granted to small companies is the ability to identify who qualifies as a small company and who does not qualify. So I'll respond to that question in two folds. The first response is, if a small company is dealing with another company that is liable to CIT, then by all means, that small company is not exempted from the requirement to withhold tax from payments to those other companies. Now, on the other hand, for companies that are dealing with small companies who are exempted from income tax, such companies, based on the clarification that has been provided by the FIRS, are still required to withhold tax from the small companies. However, once the small companies file their tax returns and are able to, justify the fact that for the year in question, they qualified as a small company, then they can request for a refund of the withholding tax that has been deducted from them. I mean, personally, I do know that that's more like, round tripping. And the question is, what if I'm able to show at the beginning of the year that I'm a small company? Why can't I just be exempted from the withholding tax? But we've seen, even during the conversations that we've been having since morning, that chances are a company might fall into the threshold or meet the threshold towards the end of the year, and at the end of the day, you become liable to taxes. So for that particular conundrum, it's still something that is being evaluated by the tax authorities, and some recommendations are still being put forward as to how it can be managed. But what you have in current day tax, obligation is that all companies are required to withhold taxes from payments to every other company, whether you're a small company or a medium or large company. And for small companies, they are required to apply to the Federal Inland Revenue Service for a refund of whatever withholding tax has been deducted from their income if they qualify as a small company at the end of the relevant financial year.
Yeah, thank you, Amina. But I remember you said there was a second part, because you started this conversation. We're talking about identification of these small companies. So I just know if you can shed more light on that, because I kind of have a question that I want to ask today, but then let me just let you speak on that. Yeah.
Okay. So identification of small company is still a gray area with Nigeria, because I mean, today I looked at it when he was talking about the definition. But that aside, I mean, like I said at the beginning of this discussion, we are focusing on the identification or the clarification or the definition for tax purposes. So we're working within the 25 million naira threshold. So yes, it's a gray area right now. And I mean, one of the things that I think personally is that the FIRS can leverage technology in this regard. I'm aware that companies who submit their income tax returns on a monthly basis and claim that they have new returns for that particular month are required to back up that proclamation with their bank statements. So, I mean, and currently you have your Tax Pro Max that has been configured to keep the track records or also the history of each company. So first things first, I know that small companies are still being issued tax clearance certificates. So historically, it's easy for you to be able to say, oh, last year I was a small company. So towards the beginning of the year, perhaps small companies can be allowed to present their TCCs to demonstrate that in the last year, I qualified as a small company and I have a tax clearance certificate to back it up. Now, the question is now what happens in the course of the year when I am yet to establish whether I remain a small company or I am going to cross the threshold and become a medium company. Again, I still think leveraging technology can assist with that. It's something that can be done. Such companies can upload their relevant information online using the Tax Pro Max platform just to get some form of, some form of verification as to whether they still qualify at the end of a particular month. And this is something that is being done in other countries. I know that in a country like Netherlands, for instance, this is something that is being done to verify whether a company meets the requirements to qualify as a small company or not. So it's something Nigeria can also adopt. But in the absence of that, what you find in a situation where companies are currently struggling to identify who qualifies as a small company or not, because it is only at the end of the year when the total revenue has been pulled together before you're able to ascertain whether or not this company qualifies. So what you find is, in some instances, most of them, you have withholding tax still being deducted from their invoices, but and again, you also have some other companies trying to justify that they are small companies for that purpose. So it's really to say the tax authority needs to come up with a form of solution to help companies, because if you are granting them a tax exemption, and withholding tax at the end of the day is an advance payment of income tax. I mean, I know that there is a process for, getting refund of whatever taxes you have overpaid. But when you look at the administrative requirements on both the small companies part and also the Federal Inland Revenue Services part, and you look at, how long it would take, unless if we have a process in place that just allows small companies to click on a button and get back, their withholding tax, then it would make sense. But if that is not what we have, then we need to put a process in place to adequately identify these companies during the course of the year.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Amma. And I totally agree with determining, or the FRS needing to put things in place so that it's clear, for small companies, because like you mentioned, advance payment of tax yet is still being deducted, and I think currently the FRS Establishment Act says you have 90 days to process a refund, and there's some instances where might even exceed that period, and these amounts, they're already small companies. My thinking is, they're small companies already having maybe cash flow issues, and that amount is again being deducted, and they have to wait to the end of the year. So I actually agree with you to say, there needs to be processes. Hopefully, the FRS will issue some kind of regulations with regards to small companies, just to show how dedicated they are to helping these companies grow, and so that going forward there's clarity on their business processes. I know the question I wanted to ask Tunde, now what you were saying is, in dealing with these small companies, I don't know if you have much interaction with them, Tunde, and what kind of documents do you typically ask from these companies to determine if they're small companies? Let's look at it from the practical. We've spoken that it's not really clear what is there from a legal standpoint, but by experience, what kind of documents do you typically get from these companies? I know Aminat mentioned TCC or bank statements, just to have clarity from your end to say what documents do you see to categorize the company as a small company by CETA standards.
Yeah, so that's a good question, practical one too. So for us, it's a bit straightforward, right? What we do now is the primary source of determinant is actually the bank statements, right? And bank statements now being, I use the word bank statement very loosely because a lot of people are banking with so many different sources now. There are a lot of fintechs that are not necessarily banks. There are people that usually OP for all their transactions. OP actually has an MFB license too. So you can call them a bank, but you wouldn't be expecting to see a GT or any account like we all used to in the past, right? You're talking of MoneyPoint, OP, whatever. So what you really need is cash flow. So how can they defend the cash flow coming in and going out? So that's like in terms of money movement, right? Bank statement primarily. Now compliance wise, aside from things like ID card and CAC documents, we actually do ask for TIN too. That's a tax identification number. But as it is now, it's actually optional. But thankfully, for those that have started registering recently, if you notice, if you look at the new certificates of incorporation, they actually have the TIN number, the TIN on them actually. That sort of helps them. But what we've seen is a lot of small businesses, and I'm also being careful to say that small business can be a small company or a small enterprise, right? Depending on who you are dealing with. When we are dealing with small businesses, we deal mostly with small companies and small businesses too. We want you to be registered. So what we've seen is even asking them to get just CAC documents sometimes can be difficult, which is why the TIN is an optional phase, an optional requirement rather. It's not something that is a make or break for us in our processes. And that's just because a lot of the businesses are not even registered. And sometimes we even have to facilitate registration for some of them to deal with them. So you would almost be, it would be very difficult for us to do business if we're making the TCC a compulsory requirement for people to access our financial services. So what we do now, like I said, is primarily bank statements, and for people that are in paid employment, sometimes depending on how their cash flow is, or well, we're not talking about those guys today, so we can leave that aside. But yeah, primarily bank statements for small businesses.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think, like Aminat said, it's a good indicator to see, where are you going, your inflows, your outflows. If you're able to defend the amounts that you have coming in, then we can definitely tell that you are a small business or you're tending towards a medium and all that. So thank you very much today for providing that practical experience. You want to say something else?
Yeah. I mean, I also like something that Aminat said, and I wanted to just add on that, which is now data is there are alternative sources of data now, right? And we see that the tax authorities are also becoming very smart about it. So for tax purposes, people might want to understate their revenue, but if they want to approach investors, they want to cough it up, right? So you see tax authorities now even monitoring people's Instagram pages. People are declaring Benz, but you say it's small businesses, but you're driving a car of 100 million naira. So if we're looking at that data, that's not quantitative data, but it's like how far, what's going on here, right? And it just gives an idea. I think somebody was even showing me an analysis of an Instagram vendor that said, oh, we sold out 20, maybe 200 bags in 1 week, and the price of the bag is there. So everybody did the estimation, right? And when the tax authority wrote to the lady, they said, you told us you made 5 million naira, but these bags you said you sold on your Instagram posts of social dates is already like 50 million. So how can you say you're making 5 million naira, right? So people are becoming more intelligent with those alternative sources of data that might go beyond just your bank statements or your financial statements, as the case may be. So I thought that was a very important point to highlight as well.
Yes, totally agree. It's very, very important to mention, because we've even seen in interactions that we've had with the FIRS and tax authorities that don't depend on the information that you're bringing anymore. They are making their own sources. So they say, this is the information that we've gotten, this is information that you have given to us. Can you itemize or show us why we shouldn't rely on what we have and what we should rely on what you've given to us? So yeah, definitely. And that example was actually very interesting, because a lot of people turn up for the ground. They want to show how everything is in that instance, and then because you don't want to pay as much taxes, there's a tendency that you might want to reduce the amount. So I totally get that, and I think I agree that yes, it's a position. Data is the field of data is so vast and so wide, and so there are different ways now that that they can obtain this information. So thank you very much, Tunde. And so I just wanted to ask some questions regarding the intricacies of these small companies, businesses. I think, let me just take it one by one. I always push everything together, but let me just ask one of that to say, I think I saw something in the chat box to say, I'm a small company, I've made a loss. How do I deal with that? Do I get to carry my loss forward, or because I know that other companies get to do that, or is it because you give me this exemption, then I've lost my loss? So let me just start with that. So how would that work?
Okay, Dami. So one of the things we had established at the beginning is that when something is not introduced or specifically addressed in the law, right, then it is not sacrosanct, right? So the law grants tax exemptions to small companies, but it does not qualify it to say, provided that when you make a loss, you do not get to carry it forward. Nor does it say that any loss that you make during the year where you qualify as a small company becomes lost, which is different from the specific provision that you have for capital allowances. So yes, based on that, any loss that is made during the period where the small company is, under tax exemption, provided that given that there is no specific provision in the law that dissuades you or says you cannot carry it forward, then on that basis, you can carry it forward. And again, this is one of the benefits of actually submitting your tax returns as and when due, because you'll find that even the FIRS already knows that you're making losses, such that when you eventually start to make profits and you try to offset those losses against the profits, then there would not be any, will I say, disagreements or disputes in that regard. Yeah, so based on the current provisions of the law as of today, small companies making losses are allowed to carry it forward indefinitely, similar to what you have applicable to medium and large companies.
Okay, thank you, Amina. So, just going off that again, another question that I had, there's so many levies that, companies are paying now, even after paying their CIT and the TET. I think we have the LASENI, we have the Police Trust Fund. And with respect to the Police Trust Fund, I just wanted to confirm because, with the LASENI, there's a 100 million threshold. So that means that, of course, as a small company, I have no business with that. But, what the Police Trust Fund Act just says the company operating in Nigeria, and there's no threshold to that. But so can I say that the small company, since I've gotten the exemption for company income tax and tertiary education tax, that that levy shouldn't also apply to me, or would it also be applicable for such companies?
My simple answer to that is no, because you cannot import the provisions of companies income tax into the Nigerian Police Trust Fund Act. And for those that may have been following, the provisions or even the amendments that were introduced by the Finance Act, you will note that initially, when the CIT exemption was introduced, there was a gap because the TET bit was not covered. And it was when a subsequent Finance Act was introduced that now closed that gap, to ensure that both CIT and TET, which is tertiary education tax, became exempt for small companies. So on that note, and of course, putting the issue of the constitutionality of the NPTF levy, which is the Nigerian Police Trust Fund levy, aside, given that the levy itself or the act that provides for that levy does not exempt small companies, then small companies are not exempt from the payments of NPTF levy.
Okay, thank you, Amina, because I know that there are some conversations to say small companies are exempt from tax, and is a way that you can just assume that all taxes are covered under the exemption. But it's good to clarify that, based on the hopefully maybe with subsequent amendments, if there will be finance acts, then we will see if those come in. But currently, what it shows is that these companies will be liable to Police Trust Fund. So I just wanted to ask a question to today, and it's similar to discussions that we've had, but just on a holistic view, looking at the tax exemptions that we have now, do you think that they have been instrumental to stimulating growth for small companies? I know we've discussed that there needs to be more incentives and maybe not always focused on tax. But just looking at where we are now, and one of the reasons why these incentives were introduced is to encourage growth, ease of doing business, and all of that. So I just wanted, do you think that that provision or that the goal is being met with regards to having these incentives? Do you think that it's stimulating growth with small companies, or do you think it's barely reaching the goal, and that's the reason why we have to bring in a bit more incentives? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, interesting. So I think that the way it is now, right, I wouldn't call it a stimulant for growth. I think it's more like, if you pardon me to use the comparison, it's like comparing painkillers and vitamins, right? So if you have headache and you want to take something that would take away the headache almost immediately, as opposed to taking a vitamin that is good for your health. I think now it's not really like solving a pain point for a lot of small businesses, but it's a nice to have. It's something that is good. I'm going to pay my returns, I'm not going to pay tax. But in terms of it being a stimulant for somebody to actually say, oh, I'm happy I'm getting tax exemption. I've not met a lot of small businesses that, see that as a stimulant. I think I was going to make this point earlier, but we didn't have the time to. I think for now it's being a stimulant for bigger businesses. If you look at home and abroad, the businesses that really enjoy tax benefits are big businesses. Guys have gotten Pioneer based on how much investments that they've made, infrastructure tax credit. I mean, some companies that have not done a road have gotten, clawback movement. Even Tesla in the US, right? Part of why they were able to expand is because they got some green credits for some of the renewable energy work that they are doing. So it's helped a lot of big businesses, which is great because you need those companies to make big investments too. You want to encourage small businesses, but you also want to encourage big businesses too. So I would say the big businesses have enjoyed it as a stimulant for their growth, but we've not yet seen it become a stimulant for these small businesses yet. It's good, but I mean, it's still early days, right? Like I said, we're still fine tuning, and some of the things to be to adjust some of those laws to current realities. Because again, when these laws were made, we knew how much the dollar was, we knew how inflation was. So things have changed. But I think the good thing is that at least for the past few years, we've seen the Finance Act, being reviewed almost annually, as opposed to, years back where it was, you have to wait for a long time to have the tax law reviewed. So I think it's not impossible to get it, to get some of those things amended in the mid to long term. So yeah, that's my response.
Yeah, I do get that. There can be some, I think they already exist, some incentives for large companies, just that we're looking at that here. But I get your point to say that you might not be able to see it clearly at the moment, but there's some work that is doing, but focusing on getting a bit more incentives that may not be focused on tax would also be very helpful to this company. So thank you very much, Tunde. And I know we're almost coming to the end of the chat. And so if anybody has any final questions that they just want to ask either Aminat or Tunde, now it's time to just drop those comments so that we can have those questions before we close. And so just question that I asked for Aminat, I think piggybacking on something that you said, that the FRS, had not maybe released the regulation on the expected process or what it's supposed to look like for small companies submitting their returns. So what would be your recommendation? I know there are sometimes when we have sit downs with the FRS to say, before you release regulation, this is our position as tax consultants to this company. So we're just imagine that we are in such a venue or a forum. What would you say would be the best way for these small companies to present their tax returns in a way that is also helpful to them, but ensures that the FRS gets the information that they're looking at?
Okay, Dami, I touched on it a little bit when I was speaking earlier, when I spoke about the fact that for some small companies, they're already relying on third-party apps or third-party processes and technological tools to pull together their resources and also their accounting information. So, it is clear based on the provisions of CAMA that they are exempt from appointing auditors to review their records. So that means that the requirement to use statutory accounts is out of the question. So of course, things like management accounts that will be backed up by perhaps bank statements and any other form of information will be required. Interestingly, what you will find is that some small companies are still getting their accounts audited because, at the end of the day, some of these small companies are also looking to become bigger and they're also looking to attract investors. So what you find is that a couple of them are already submitting their accounting information to the tax authorities based on statutory financial statements. We've also touched on it during our discussion that most people want to start learning during the process. You don't want a situation where it is the year that you qualify as a medium company that you now start becoming aware of all the requirements that you are expected to meet. So first things first is, yes, they can use their management accounts, which is going to be pulled or spooled from the different applications that they may be using to track it over the years. And I'd also mentioned that FRS can also use the tax PROMAX as a tool for allowing tax small companies to report their information on a monthly basis. Even though they are exempt from making monthly VAT returns, there could be that application online that allows you to input your information. I was particularly impressed when I heard about the one-click TCC application button. Something of that nature can be introduced for small companies, just to allow them to also input their information either on a yearly basis or on a monthly basis to pull it together so that they're able to file their tax returns on that basis.
Thank you very much, Amina. So I think, those are, till we get a clear regulations issued by the FRS, good for companies to rely on that. You have financial statements or management accounts, whatever you can use, and you're able to back it up with sufficient support documents, and you can use that to just finalize and submit your tax returns. And so I think we're almost at the end of the session, and I just want to maybe take closing remarks from both Aminat and Tunde. So maybe I'll just start with Tunde again, just to see any closing remarks you have based on the conversation we've had so far.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ami. Thank you, Aminat, KPMG for having me. I think on a final note, I'm just going to allude to something. We've mentioned it severally, but I think it's worth saying again that at the end of the day, tax compliance and payments is a social contract, right? So it's a contract between us and the government. We play our part, they're supposed to play their part too. I know many of us, can be a bit hesitant to want to comply, particularly small businesses, because you feel like, oh, I'm taking care of this, I'm wanting my power and my own security, and my own power holding company, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes these things are chicken and egg, right? In terms of who does what first. So I'd just like to encourage every one of us, whether employees, small businesses, individuals, to try and comply as much as possible, even if we're filing new returns, because we have exemptions. We have to play our part so that the government can also play their part as well. So those will be my final words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tunde. Okay, so I just saw a question that I wanted you to just speak to just before you give your closing remarks. Maybe you can respond to the question and then provide your closing remarks together. Interesting one, I think might be clearly stated, but just to provide clarity, we're talking about, it says, is there an exemption for a startup company that is in their second year but has a gross turnover of 30 million? So in the second year, have a gross turnover of 30 million, but they made a loss at the end of the financial year due to the economy of the country. So what is asking, is there any exemption? So I think that company has crossed the threshold, or it's just confirming if there's any exemption. And then I think another one that I wanted to ask is, someone is saying that the exemption for small businesses, does it cut across state, local, and federal? Or is it just one that is limited? Is there an harmonization between all of those? So we just take those two questions along with your closing remarks. Then that'll be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Dami. Okay, so with regards to the first question, I think we've established that the tax exemption in question is for companies that are yet to cross the threshold. Of course, there are some other benefits that are applicable to startups, but it's not a tax exemption, that it will not fall under the tax exemption for small companies that we have been analyzing over the course of the last 2 hours. So once the company crosses the threshold, I'm not sure if we have defined it, but medium companies are companies that make 25 million and one up to 100 million, right? So such company becomes a medium company. But if in that year you make a loss, then of course the law allows you to carry forward that loss until the time when a profit is made, and the loss can be offset with the assessable profit in question. That's the first question. Dami, please, could you repeat the second question?
I think the second question was working around harmonization, to say,
okay.
Yeah, between state, local, and federal, is there an harmonization here?
Okay, so I think we also touched on that a bit during the discussion when we differentiated the companies that were, liable or that were beneficiary of this tax exemption. And what we said was that these are companies that have been duly registered under the CAMA. So I think Tunde touched it when he was speaking, which is basically the fact that for business enterprises, as companies that are registered with business names, your tax is being paid to the state's Internal Revenue Service, depending on the state in which you're resident. And based on the existing Personal Income Tax Act, there is no exemption for businesses as of today. That's business enterprises, because in that instance, the owner of the business will be paying their payee, of course, taking into consideration the different allowances that are applicable for that for your income as you have earned it. So if such business also makes a loss, or if there is if what you make at the end of the day, after taking into consideration your business profits, if what you make is within or below the threshold, or it qualifies as income that is liable to minimum tax, by all means, that is what will be paid. But I agree with the participants who said that there should be some form of harmonization. But one of the things I've also mentioned is, at the point, we need to even understand what is the quantum. Like, let's look at it holistically. What is the quantum of this benefit, or what is the quantum of number of companies that are enjoying this tax incentive? Because when we're talking about the fact that it has a long-term impact, at the point we need to sit down and say, what is the volume of tax incentive that is being granted to small companies holistically? And then on that basis, we also need to, look at the effect on the economy. By the time that is done, and we see that it has a positive impact on the economy, then such law can be extended to the state and also the local government. Because at the moment, this is just still a federal exemption. But by the time the federal government is able to see that this exemption that we gave to small companies is having a positive impact, when the data is available, then we can extend it to both the state and the local government, and then have that harmonization that we are craving for. But that would only be possible if companies and even businesses are reporting their income and as and when due. I mean, if it is clear that companies in the first few years of operation are making losses, then it is easier to come up with a holistic law that governs all businesses, whether you're a registered company or you're a business enterprise, because the essence is really to support you to grow. It's to incentivize that investment by different sectors of the economy. So yes, I think data is still something that needs to be pulled to enable us to, come together to harmonize the tax incentives for companies and also business enterprises. And, that brings me to my closing remark to say, yes, it's important that small businesses and even business enterprises are aware of what they are entitled to. We have talked about a couple of incentives. We have talked about a couple of compliance requirements. And of course, Tunde also mentioned some of the things that he has seen in practice, which is basically the fact that a lot of people do not even know what they are entitled to. So this type of conversations need to continue to ensure that people are aware of what is obtainable, and then they meet the requirements as they go forward. Because you will find that even for you to access grants or even some of these loans that are applicable, you may need to demonstrate what status of business you currently have. You may need to demonstrate that you've been complying with the relevant provisions of the law before you can be granted those, you can be extended those grants. So I think on that note, I would like to say thank you, Dami, and I hope I've been able to do justice to the questions that were asked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Aminat. Just before I move on, Tunde, I saw your hand up earlier. I don't know if you still wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, just quickly, right? I mean, and it's just a sideline point. So I noticed that the question specifically said startup company. And just to be very, very technical, I'm assuming that he or she used the word startup deliberately. There's a Nigerian Startup Act that sort of governs what a startup is. They have their own tax incentives. They're actually eligible for Pioneer if you're labeled a startup. I know, sometimes we make this mistake where we conflate what is small businesses and what a startup is. But with the Nigerian Startup Act now, it specifically defines what a startup is. And if you meet those particular requirements for what a label startup is and you get registered, there are specific tax incentives that apply to a labeled startup. I just thought I should add that because the person used the word startup specifically.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. And it was good to make that distinction so that we are all aware. And so I want to say thank you, Tunde, and thank you, Aminat, for the session. It has been very engaging and very insightful. I noticed some questions that came up, but I think they came up after we had kind of responded or kind of answered those questions. And I also know I saw a comment there to say, person joined late, would they be able to get the recording? So, just to speak to those that ask questions that seem not to be answered, and the individual that asks about the recording, it will be available on YouTube. And so I would just enjoy people to go back and get a re-listen just to see how we've spoken to the questions that you might have had subsequently, and just to glean from the knowledge that Aminat and Tunde have shared with us. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. See you next month.
This isn't the world you grew up in. You've become an expert in areas of the business that go well beyond tax. Your organization is more global, increasingly digital. Your business models are more complex. Compliance is getting complicated, and penalties are more severe. Governments around the world have moved